Look at the picture. See the skull, the part of bone removed, the master race Frankenstein radio controls, the brain thoughts broadcasting radio, the eyesight television, the Frankenstein earphone radio, the threshold brainwash radio, the latest new skull reforming to contain all Frankenstein controls.
You just entered Untamed Dimensions. Your navigator for this cosmic adventure is Space Ranger Adam Gorightly, captain of the starship Psychopath. Now, prepare yourself, Earthlings, for Untamed Dimensions.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you listening out there, wherever you may be listening, from the great American heartland to the pyramidal structures on Mars. You're listening to another startling episode of Untamed Dimensions with me, your host, Adam Gorightly, and brought to you, as always, by our sponsors, the International Jewish Banking Conspiracy, undermining the world's economies since 1840. In our intro, you heard a few lines regarding a diabolic technology called Frankenstein radio control, which was discovered and revealed to mankind sometime in the 1970s, as I recall, by a fellow named Francis E Dec Esquire, who, it just so happens, this show tonight is dedicated to. And our tour guide down this treacherous trail, littered as it is with deadly Tabin needles and the aforementioned Frankenstein radio controls, is our guest, the noted decologist, Forrest Jackson. Mr. Jackson, a lifelong resident of Dallas, Texas, is the publisher of two books. They are Cosmic Suicide, The Tragedy and Transcendence of Heaven's Gate, and Three Myths of Gods, Devils, and Beasts. These books are available at www.pintaradial.com and sometimes can be found on eBay. In December 1994, he first learned about the mad, deadly, worldwide communist gangster computer god at an after-hours party at Forbidden Books and Video. 1 year later, after much research, he and two co-conspirators visited Mr. Dec himself in a VA hospital in New York. Today, Forrest works at Rosedale Rare Books. We welcome now to the Untamed Dimension airwaves, Mr. Forrest Jackson. Welcome, Forrest.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on.
So, Forrest, if you could, please tell us about your Decian Odyssey. Apparently you were first briefed with Dec Intel at the after-hours party you mentioned. What exactly were you exposed to at that time, and what course did this set you on?
Okay, I suppose we should thank R. Crumb for publishing the one of the rants on the back of Weirdo magazine, and then it became to the attention of Ivan Stang of the Church of the Subgenius, and he started distributing the tape that Doc Britton had recorded. Many people think that the voice that they hear on the Francis Dec rants is Mr. Dec himself, but in fact it's a professional radio DJ who now works on the West Coast. Then it was passed on to Joe Riley and Kenneth Weinert and Jason Cohen, who owned Forbidden Books, and he had put it on, and at a party, everyone was completely mesmerized by it. Of course, it was funny at first, and we could hardly make sense of it. But then, I got my own copy of the tape and listened to it several times and figured out that it wasn't just crazy, that there actually is a message in the rants. And so I guess we can discuss that from here.
Yes. What exactly is that message?
Well, of course, it's kind of hard to encapsulate, and there's a lot of specialized vocabulary that he uses, like the mad, deadly, worldwide gangster computer god. Well, that would represent, say today, the Internet that has all the world communicating. And there's other things that he wrote about that have also come true, like the one thing he mentions is the sealed robot arm operating cabinet, which now doctors have essentially a booth that they put a patient in, and the computer guides the surgery. So, like I said, it's hard to totally encapsulate everything that he had to say, but I guess what I'd like to point out is that almost everything that he postulated has come true to some extent, however mundane.
So Mr. Dec was a visionary.
Yes. I mean, it's granted he had paranoid schizophrenia, but he also had poetic genius. When you hear some of his rants, the way the cadence, and I think it's iambic pentameter that he speaks in, and it communicates on another level as well, rather than just mad ranting.
A couple thoughts come to mind. To quote, I think it was Charles Manson. He said, "Paranoia is a higher form of awareness." And secondly, a friend of mine, Greg Bishop, has a show called Radio Mysterioso, and I turned him on to the Doc Britton recordings many years ago. He plays them on his show occasionally, and he noted he normally hates poetry, but he loves the poetry of Francis Dec. If somebody's going to perform poetry, Mr. Dec did it right in Greg Bishop's mind.
Yeah, and I suppose the only problem is that so much of this work that he's created has been lost. He claims that he mailed worldwide thousands of letters detailing his struggle against the police and judges and the deadly sneak parroting puppet gangsters that were out to get him. And so far, there's only 5 or 6 items that have survived.
Yeah. And these items, let's talk about the history behind, I guess, what, for want of a better term, rants or these broadsheets he was sending out. You say, the first one in an R. Crumb comic, then Forbidden Books published some?
Well, no, I wouldn't say Forbidden Books published anything. He just would play it in his store.
Okay, the Doc Britton recordings.
Yeah, Doc Britton. That got out on the underground tape trading circuit.
Right.
And it's also written up in Don Akazi's excellent book, Kooks, A Guide to the Outer Limits of Human Belief. And I think that can be had at bookhappy.com, book with a hyphen, happy.com.
Yes.
But so she brought it even to a wider audience. As for Mr. Dec's history, he served in World War II. I don't think he saw any combat, but was in the Army Air Corps, and then went to law school. And I'm not sure which law school yet. There are people researching that. And then he got a client who hired him to get an insurance claim. And he got the insurance claim and was accused of forging his name on the back of the check. Forging the client's name on the back of the check and keeping the money, which is a felony in New York. And this is what started his mental state to erode. He felt that he had been railroaded by these other judges and lawyers whom he'd probably pissed off. He's a very angry person and accusatory. It seems that he hates everyone except for Will Rogers. Is the only person he speaks kindly of in his rants. And so you can see in his rants, like the one to all judges, that he's constantly appealing his case. Even into the 1970s. It made it to the Supreme Court, was not heard by the Supreme Court.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so he was imprisoned, and then he also speaks of going to a maximum security insanity prison, which means he was possibly exposed to agents of, say, MK-Ultra, where experiments could have been done on him in the late 1950s and 1960s. At that point, his rants changed and became what he's famous for now, talking about the Frankenstein controls and the earphone radio. We can go into all that.
Sure. The timeline then with, Mr. Dec getting locked up, so that was in the mid-50s, you're saying?
No, it would probably be later than the mid-50s.
Okay.
So well into the MK-Ultra period.
Sure.
If that, that is a possibility that it happened to him. Scrambled his brains.
Yes, certainly. And during the course of this show, at the midway point, I'll play a Doc Britton interpretation of Francis Dec, and also at the end of the show to give folks a flavor of the poetic style of Francis Dec. And I want to say at this time, the opinions expressed by Francis E Dec Esquire are not necessarily the views of yours truly, Adam Gorightly, or Blog Talk Radio, or its gangster scum on top sponsors. However, the reality of Frankenstein radio controls are undeniable.
I agree. People do want to distance themselves from Francis Dec's theories because there's a lot of racism, and of course that's such a touchy subject for most people.
Sure.
I don't get too worked up about it personally, but I understand why a lot of people do.
Either do I, because we're basically looking into the life of somebody who was perhaps tormented by MK Ultra operators, and expressed his views that he mentions slimy Jew doctors, and
he mentions his low, deadly Nigger Town old house, and I've been to that house, and I've seen his neighbors, and I can see why he might be afraid of some of them.
Well, I want to talk about the film you made, the journey you went on, but any other background we need to discuss before going into that, feel free.
Well, like I said, I heard these rants in 1994, December of 94, and it just they kind of possessed me. I had to find this person, Francis E Dec Esquire.
Yes.
So I did a lot of research of phone logs in New York, and eventually just wrote a letter to the address, 29 Maple Avenue, Hempstead, New York. And I got a letter back from his only brother, the deadly murder assassin spy agent, Joseph I. Dec, who wrote back saying that Francis Dec was inactive in a VA hospital, physically incapacitated, and he mentioned that Joseph mentioned that it was a blessing to receive letters such as mine, because of course I was profuse in my compliments to Mr. Dec. And so at that point I realized, okay, how many VA hospitals can we find in New York? Called them, and eventually got to one that said that they had him. So next thing, book some flights. And a friend of mine, David Hansen, and Ian Schussler accompanied. They were a great help in this, I got to say. So we wore black suits and went up to the VA hospital and with our video camera to try to gain some wisdom from him.
Yes.
Unfortunately, he'd lapsed into what I might call catatonic schizophrenia. He was unable to communicate, extremely skinny and gaunt, probably skinnier than William S. Burroughs, and just as old looking. And so he would not answer questions. Later I talked to one of the nurses, and she said that he never spoke. Well, he might have said something at one point, but she wouldn't give me many more details than that. Joseph Dec flipped out that people were visiting his brother and denied our future access to him because we wanted to go back and, even if we couldn't have our video camera, talk to him. So it turns out that Joseph Dec seems to have a paranoid streak as well. A few years later, after this, I went back to 29 Maple Avenue and rang the doorbell, and sure enough, coaxed Joseph Dec out to sit on the front stoop and talk to me and another friend. And he was extremely evasive and paranoid in his own way.
So he wasn't willing to admit his part in the gangster god conspiracy, whatever.
No, and then also, Francis Dec accuses him of murder as well, and so he might have his own shady past to cover up. When he first introduced himself, he introduced himself as Pat, and it wasn't until I questioned him some more and said, that it was his brother, Francis was his brother, that I said, okay, well, then you must be Joseph Dec, because Francis Dec said he had only one brother.
So you're still kind of following this trail, and there's other researchers looking into Francis Dec.
Yeah, there's a man in Pennsylvania Ted Torbich, who I would consider the number one Francis Dec fan in the world. And then there's a cartoonist in Sweden named Peter Branting who's put together Francis Dec Fan Club, and you can get to it by going to francisedec.com. That's a pointer to his Swedish website. Of course, it's in English, and the cartoons are hilarious, and it gives you a lot more information than you and I can get to,
sure.
now.
And I must mention I'm a member of the Francis Dec Fan Club, and it's a great site, and I'll try to post all these links on my blog.
That'd be great.
I think at this point, Forrest, I'm going to play a Doc Britton reading of Francis Dec, and this runs about 6 minutes. So you'll need to stand by on the line, or, of course, you can get up and stretch your legs and shake the dew from the lily and get an adult beverage such as your want.
Okay.
And we'll launch this Francis Dec audio file right now. Enjoy.
Gangster Computer God Worldwide Secret Containment Policy. Made possible solely by Worldwide Computer God Frankenstein Controls, especially lifelong constant threshold brainwash radio. Quiet and motionless, I can slightly hear it. Repeatedly, this has saved my life on the streets. 4 billion worldwide population, all living, have a Computer God Containment Policy brain bank brain, a real brain, in the brain bank cities on the far side of the moon we never see. Primarily based on your lifelong Frankenstein radio controls, especially your eyesight, TV, sight, and sound, recorded by your brain, your moon brain of the Computer God activates your Frankenstein threshold brainwash radio lifelong, inculcating conformist propaganda, even frightening you and mixing you up, and the usual, don't worry about it, for your setbacks, mistakes, even when you receive deadly injuries. This is the Worldwide Computer God Secret Containment Policy. Worldwide, as a Frankenstein slave, usually at night, you go to nearby hospital or camouflaged miniature hospital van trucks, you strip naked, lay on the operating table, which slides into the sealed Computer God robot operating cabinet. Intravenous tubes are connected. The slimy, vicious Jew doctor simply pushes the starting button based upon your Computer God brain on the moon, which records progress in your systematic butchery. Your butchery is continued. Exactly. Systematically. The Computer God operating cabinet has many robot arms, with electrical and laser beam knife robot arms, with fly-eye TV cameras watching your whole body. Every part of you is monitored, even through your Frankenstein controls. Synthetic blood, synthetic instant sealing flesh and skin, even synthetic electrical heartbeat to keep you alive are some of the unbelievable Computer God instant plastic surgery secrets. You are the highest, most intelligent electrical machine in the universe. Inevitability of gradualness. Usually in a few years you are made string bean thin or grotesquely deformed, crippled and ugly, or even made over 1 foot shorter or 1 foot taller, as the Computer God sees fit. Virtually all of the important instant plastic surgery is done to you inside the Computer God sealed robot operating cabinet. Even unbelievable, impossible plastic surgery operations. All impossible even for dozens of vicious kosher-bosher doctors working around the clock for weeks. The Computer God sealed robot arm operating cabinet can perform all of the above impossible plastic surgery operations overnight, even dwarfing you over a foot or increasing your height by 2 feet. This is possible because Computer God robot operating cabinet imitates your micro-miniature electrical current intelligence system in your body. It even duplicates the micro-miniature electric currents that soften your broken bones to create mending of them, and then creates stress, either compressing the bones, thereby shortening them, or stress to make the bones grow longer. Spring 1984, Mr. Dec, lifelong would-be doctor and printer. Insight to the worldwide Computer God stratified closed society, perfected by hospital birth, making possible lifelong Frankenstein controls and lifelong hampering human defects. Containment policy. hospital birth lifelong gifts. Example, deformed, crippled, retarded, pox, hives, warts, moles, blindness, deafness, poor vision, etc. Kosher-bosher containment policy work. Good doctor's secret health. Example, cataract, rheumatism, weak heart, damaged vision, epilepsy, fainting spells, paralysis, loss of memory, trembling, gout, diabetes, many diseases. The worldwide unbelievable lowest deadly gangster kosher-bosher vicious medical profession, worldwide unbelievable instant plastic surgery butchery of the body and brain, especially the face. Wipe-on hormones and laser beam surgery causing instant ugly, deep wrinkles, scars, age spots, arthritis, freckles, blemishes, pimples, red, brown, black, or even sick white face and body. Worldwide dark negroidic colored male sex organs to brainwash inferior female brain for overall plan, intermarry with niggers. Total graying and balding, even hairy body and furry body, mustached, bearded women, even wipe-on synthetic hormones causing cancerous growth, bloating, swelling, deformed big pickle nose, bulldog hanging cheeks and jowls, from teenage gradual wipe-on, yellowing, browning, and blackening of teeth, and instant grinding and acids leaving hollow brown stumps, so vocal cords are made raspy, aged, creating a wrinkled, ugly, gargoylic, clown booze face worldwide population by age 70, deformed, crippled, weak, and brain damaged, no, senile, lingering for inevitability of gradualness, extermination. For your only hope for a future, do you know one word of prayer for me, Francis E Dec? Computer God computerized brain-thinking sealed robot operating arm surgery cabinet machine removal of most of the frontal command lobe of the brain, gradually during lifetime and overnight in all insane asylums after Computer God kosher-bosher 1-month probation period, creating helpless, hopeless Computer God Frankenstein earphone radio parroting puppet brainless slaves, resulting in millions of hopeless, helpless, homeless derelicts in all Jerusalem, USA cities and Soviet slave work camps. Not only the hangman rope deadly gangster parroting puppet scum on top know this top medical secret, even worse, deadly gangster Jew disease from deaf Ronnie Reagan to USSR Gorbachev know this IVA computer god containment policy top secret. Eventual brain lobotomization of the entire world population for the worldwide deadly gangster communist computer god overall plan, an ideal worldwide population of light-skinned, low, hopeless and helpless Jew mulattoes, the communist black wave of the future.
Okay, there you have it, a reading from Doc Britton from the works of Francis E Dec, and you're listening to Untamed Dimensions with Adam Gorightly and our guest, Forrest Jackson, who's a noted decologist, and we also have another caller on the line, calling from the 412 area code. Listener, are you there?
Yeah, it's me. This is Ted Torbich, the aforementioned Dec fan that Forrest Jackson had referred to earlier.
Wow, it's great to hear your voice.
Is that you, Forrest?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's great to hear your voice, too.
Hello there, Ted. Hey, turn down your computer or radio or whatever you have on there.
I certainly will do that.
And
it was so nice to hear that rant unexpurgated. I was afraid that you might, boulderize it, but thank you for playing it completely all the way through.
Oh, I wouldn't think of playing it censored or edited.
Hey, turn down your computer or radio or whatever.
Because Genesis Peorage in his psychic TV song, St. Francis E., I feel like he butchered it.
Yes, I'm not familiar with that work, but tell me how you got interested, Ted, in the works of Francis E. Dec.
Well, it's kind of odd because I do recall many years ago when I first got online on the internet, being a conspiracy theorist that I am, I got involved in a lot of different fringe things, and I know I came across Dec's rants at some point in time many years ago, but they didn't seem to strike a chord with me at the time. Mm-hmm. And it was only probably at the beginning of last year, I would say, that a really good friend of mine by the name of Brian Halgus, who I actually work with, he'll probably be listening to this show in archive form, so I'll say hi to him, and to his daughter, who is also showing some interest in Francis Dec now. He gave me a CD of Doc Britton's recordings, and ever since I heard them, that led me to do a little more research, and one of the first people I actually got in touch with was Forrest Jackson. So it was my getting in touch with him and then some networking with other people that led me to do some more in-depth research myself that really caused me to develop what you might call a mania for Francis Dec.
Let me ask you a couple things. What do you find compelling about Francis Dec, and where has your research led you?
Well, actually, it's his style of writing is probably, I like to call it viral, because there seems to be something about it, whether you read it or whether you hear Doc Britton do his recordings of it, it almost is mesmerizing. Like Forrest said earlier, that everybody in that bookshop was mesmerized when they first heard the tape being played, and I think that it has a certain kind of a structure or the way he puts it forward. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's almost viral. It gets inside you, and then it's like something that you just have to explore and try to understand.
Yeah.
That's about the best way I can put it.
And you say you've done some research. Have you turned up anything new? Or where has this research led?
Well, thanks to a lot of good people who have been helpful to me, not the least of which is Forrest Jackson, who, with his two friends, are probably the only actual fans of Francis Dec to have ever actually met the man. And to Peter Branting and his great putting together of information on his website, and many other people. I decided to do some research on my own through trying to dig up some of the records related to his court case and some other things that we could actually get, to get some background into the man himself. And so I was able to actually get his actual appeal to the Supreme Court of New York from New York State, and I was also able to get a copy from the National Archives of his actual Supreme Court appeal.
Wow.
Which was denied certiorari. And so looking at those two documents, which were written, pretty close in time to each other, but prior to the rants that we have, we can see sort of like a blossoming of his paranoia. And that I think is, when I was first able to get those documents, that really put that idea in my mind that here we can see a progression and we can kind of understand this man a little bit better and where some of his later ideas came from.
Right. Now, there's a new reading out that you've done of Mr. Dec on YouTube. Is that from these materials you uncovered?
Yes. Well, this is actually the story of that particular rant, which is a really short piece, is kind of interesting because a lot of people had thought that Doc Britton had done all of his material that was extant in his recordings, but in fact, the particular piece that I do on YouTube was written on the back of one of his rants that Doc Britton did record, and that's the Master Race Frankenstein Control rant. And this was on the back side of it, and for whatever reason, Doc Britton didn't do the entire thing. So I noticed that Donna Cossey had reproduced it in her book, and I was curious about it because it was also mentioned on a forum in an obscure search I did on Google one time in relation to the Church of the Subgenius that Forrest Jackson talked about earlier. And some people were claiming that it was, in fact, not authentic. And so I got in touch with Donna Cossey and asked her, and she did verify that was on the back side of her the Master Race Frankenstein controls. So, in a sense, we sort of rediscovered that in association with her. It was out there, but a lot of people were completely unfamiliar with it because of the fact that Doc Britton had not actually included that in his verbal interpretation.
Yes.
I suspect that maybe Doc Britton didn't actually have that information. If, in fact, it was handwritten by Mr. Dec, maybe he only had a typewritten photocopy and may not have even had that information.
I think you might be right, and I think that actually, if you look at some of his material, that we've gotten photocopies of a couple of the rants from various sources. You know, I know we got a very good copy from Donna Cossey herself that Forrest was able to get after you met her, didn't you? Yeah,
last summer.
Was that earlier? Was that last year that you met her?
Last summer, about 11 months ago.
Yeah. Okay. So, and we were able to get a pretty good photocopy of the actual rant itself, the front and back. And I suspect, as Forrest says, that perhaps he only had the front side, and that may be why he didn't include the entire thing. So, since it had never been performed before, I decided if I was going to put something together, I would do something that hadn't been done before, and that's why I chose that particular piece.
Very good. Hey, we have another caller on the line, but before we go to the caller, I wanted to ask Forrest about his meeting with Francis Dec, and you say he was in a catatonic state, but I found it interesting, and he sent me a copy of that video. He doesn't look catatonic. He was staring right at you guys, staring into your camera as if he was trying to talk to you, and it's a very, very moving moment, I felt, when I saw that video of him looking at you and looking into the camera.
Well, I do think he was aware of us being there. Mm-hmm. Some people consider it cruel that we dressed him in black suits and went to go fulfill his fantasy, but we were there to venerate him. I don't really look at it as cruelty. At one point, one of us says, Mr. Dec, if you can understand us, just please nod. Instead of nodding, he shifts his eyes looking at the person who's speaking.
Yeah.
So I think he could hear us, but they had him completely constrained. They had him lashed down to the stretcher and had a touch tape and needle in his arm and had wrapped it with gauze so he couldn't pull it out, and they had a television pointing right at his head. So here is somebody who hated television more than anything.
Yeah.
Is stuck there having to watch it 24 hours a day. I can hardly think of a worse fate.
Now, what the hell is a Tabin needle? Is that a medical term for?
Well, Tabin was a type of Nazi nerve gas, and as for the Tabin needle, it's one of the many things he postulated, along with the around corners projection of deadly touch tarantula spiders. Do we know exactly what that is? No, but we have a pretty good idea about, the Tabin needle, because it actually, Tabin is an actual neurotoxin. He talks about deadly poison nerve gas smoke being sprayed at him from cigars on airplanes, and, we all know that cigar smoke is actually poisonous. He just made it overly dramatic.
It seems like you have these some of these Dec phrases firmly emblazoned in your mind.
Yeah, that is true, but I got to say, it's hard to just reel them off in succession without stumbling over them. Doc Britton is a professional, and he apparently read these off in the mid-1980s just in cold cuts. He just read them off the sheets. So it's really hard to beat him in reading these rants.
Have you been in touch with old Doc Britton recently? What do you think of all of your stuff you guys are up to?
Not recently, no. It would be about 10 years ago. Okay. He was somewhat cooperative at the time. Gave me a tape and an autographed picture of himself because he's a radio personality, and he made it clear that he didn't want these rants being sold, and so, that's why on the videotape that I made, there's no Doc Britton on it.
Right. Now, I don't have a specific link, but if you do a web search for Francis E Dec, you can find the aforementioned Francis Dec Fan Club and also these readings of Doc Britton, which are pretty easy to find, and it's some great stuff. Now, I'm going to go to another caller we have here, and it's the 214 area code, the same as Mr. Jackson, and we'll go to that caller now. Hello, caller, are you there? State your name and what planet you're calling from.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right. My name is Melba Jackson, and I'm calling from Sulphur Bluff, Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fascinated to hear that recording because I know for a fact my nephew Jesse used to have a tape of that he would play in his bedroom for hours on end, and we would worry about him. I would pray without ceasing for him because
you were concerned about the Frankenstein radio controls, all that stuff?
Yes, I was, and we would pray for him, and I'm not sure whatever became of him. He ran away, and we have not heard from him in many years. But I do think there was some truth in that tape, though, and there's parts of it I remember well.
Should we pray for, who is this now?
Jesse.
You want to take a moment of silence, sir?
Yes.
Okay, Forrest?
Yes.
Ted, you there?
Yes.
Let's take just a moment of silence here for Jesse, okay?
May I pray for Jesse and ask your listening audience to agree with me in prayer?
We'll start this prayer right now. Listening audience, Forrest and Ted, a couple seconds of prayer for Jesse.
Lord,
hold on a second. Oh, you're going to actually say the prayer. I was thinking of a moment.
Yes.
You go ahead and say the prayer. Yeah, we'll do it that way.
May I? You're so kind.
Well, yeah, get on with it.
Thank you. All right, I'll make it quick.
Yeah.
All right,
we're waiting.
Here I go. I'm about to start. Lord, we lift up Jesse to you and pray that this influence of this Francis Dec would be broken off of his mind, especially the part about dark negroidic sex organs, synthetic wipe-on hormones, and the low, deadly Niggertown old house, although my house is kind of a low, deadly Niggertown old house. But anyway, Lord, we just pray that you would break the hold off of Jesse's mind and bring him back for our family. And I pray for his safety and safekeeping in the name of Jesus. Amen. And thank you for these young men. Although I suspect they might not know you, Jesus, may they also come to a saving knowledge of you. Amen.
Well, thank you.
That was beautiful.
That was great.
Thank you.
Forrest or Ted, your thoughts?
Well, I've never had any Frankenstein controls broken off in my mind, so I don't know what could have befallen Jesse. But I like to look at it more as poetry and couldn't be destructive in somebody's life.
Well, he talked nonstop about deadly poison nerve gas smoke. And that's why I would not fly on commercial airplanes. And we tried to fly him to Promises, that rehabilitation place, because he was also addicted to crystal methamphetamine.
Oh, dear.
And he would smoke those drugs and then listen to Francis Dec, the tapes, for days at a time.
You know, in short doses, I could see a benefit to that, but Yeah.
Oh, no, I don't think so.
Well, it sounds to me like Jesse was a parroting puppet that he would just have to take in this information and regurgitate it.
Well, he did become a parroting puppet gangster slave eventually.
Was there any
And
scum on top?
The synthetic nerve radio directional antenna loop is the worst part of it all, and there's not enough discussion about that. So I'll hang up and listen to you talk about that off the air.
Thank you, darling.
What
was your name?
I do macrame. And
yeah, we're not really interested in that part of your story, but thanks for calling in.
All right. God bless you.
Well, thank you.
Bye.
So the synthetic nerve radio directional antenna loop is drawn on one of his rants. It's fitting around the neck that it connects with the brain bank brain on the far side of the moon. To my knowledge, that's the only thing that is yet to be discovered. That sounds completely, crazy and out of this world. But these other things like the earphone radio, that's happened now. You see people walking around with Bluetooth earphone radios, and they're talking to themselves on street corners as if they're paranoid schizophrenics. And how many times have you seen somebody talking to themselves and you think, oh, there's a nutcase, and you realize they're just talking to their stockbroker?
I see them all the time in airports waiting to get, aboard the plane, and you think they're talking to you until you turn a little bit and you see the stupid thing in their ears talking to, they're talking about how they got to get out to Des Moines to take, solve the problems going on there. But
so I'm still waiting to find out about the brain bank brain on the far side of the moon.
Yeah, what is the brain bank brain? Do you have any?
I think what he's saying is that all people's thoughts are controlled due to these Frankenstein controls put into them at birth in hospitals by the slimy, vicious, kosher-bosher doctors. And as people grow up into their form-fitting Frankenstein controls, their minds can be controlled from the far side of the moon, obviously a type of lunacy. What Mr. Dec had was called, what could be called schizophreniform influencing machine delusion, which is a well-known psychiatric disorder where they think that this great godlike machine is controlling everything. And, Philip K. Dick, a famous science fiction writer, had much the same thing with Valus. It's just Valus had a rather more positive influence as opposed to everything is so negative with Mr. Dec.
Yes. Now, we're almost to the end of the show, and I wanted to save a little time to play another Doc Britton reading, but any closing thoughts? We'll go to Ted first.
Well, I'd like to say just very quickly that I'm certainly happy we had the opportunity to have this little Decathon on your show, Adam, and I wanted to thank you for that. And I wanted to say especially to Jesse, don't worry too much about the deadly touch tape and needles and the radio directional antenna loop and all that other stuff. I'd be more concerned about the part of bone removed when they put that Frankenstein controls in your brain.
Yeah.
That's probably the thing that really is going to get you, that part of bone removed. So anyway, as far as the schizophreniform machine delusion, we're very thankful that we have some great history on that from James Tilly Matthews, who was probably the first person ever to be diagnosed with that, with his heirloom. And I think that based on some of the research that we've come across, as Forrest said, we do believe that this is the particular condition that Francis unfortunately suffered from. What makes him so special, in my mind, in a lot of ways, is the fact that if he did have schizophrenia in some form, he was able to function in society. He was in the armed forces. He went to law school. He got a degree. He became a practicing lawyer. He was a notary public. He did all of these things And he did this with a mental illness that didn't become full-blown until later in life, after his gangsterization by New York State and other authority figures, and his trial and punishment and all of the things that came after that, which drove him to the advanced state of paranoia that he later came to have. And I think it's a great testament to him as an individual that he was able to overcome what must have been a lifelong condition, enough for him to get to the point where he did before he had a total and complete collapse.
And what higher calling than to be a notary public?
Well, hey, you know what? That's only one step away from Playboy scum on top, or so I've heard.
Yeah. Forrest?
Well, first of all, yes, thank you. This has been fun, and I enjoyed recently reading your book, The Shadow over Santa Susana. That was great, and it brought up some new facts that I wasn't aware of, so I want to thank you for that. I also want to say that happy birthday to Peter Branting in Sweden. Today's his birthday.
Yes.
Oh,
Very good. Hey, any contact information you guys want to give out, or any?
Well, I think you can probably get us all through francisedec.com, and that's a pointer directly to the Francis Dec official fan club.
Hey, and that's something we owe to Francis Dec, bringing us all together.
Yeah, and so that forum is a whole lot of fun. So I think people should at least ought to look into it.
Well, good deal, gentlemen. I'm going to close out here with a Francis Dec reading by Doc Britton. So, hey, thanks for coming on, Ted and Forrest.
Thanks.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you for having us.
And that wraps up another startling edition of Untamed Dimensions. Join us here each and every week, my friends, for the continuing adventures of the Starship Psychopath. So good night. God bless. Keep those cards and letters coming, all of you out there. In the great American heartland, to the pyramidal structures on Mars. Until that time, Maxwell, until that time. Take it away, Francis.
Worldwide open secret, solely Mr. Dec heralds the true God in the entire history of the universe. Not even in the Truth Ive Pravda is Mr. Francis E Dec Esquire's 8-page detailed letter exposing the worldwide deadly communist gangster computer god and the worst, deadliest enemy of the entire human race and the entire universe in the entire history of the entire universe, namely the communist atheist conspiracy with all of the deadly gangster, unbelievable, sophisticated Frankenstein controls, the Catholic Church. These facts, like the below facts, cannot be found in the communist gangster computer god concocted and manipulated so-called history and news media. Communist gangster computer god unbelievably staged like Hollywood scum on top Tsarina, alias great dictator Franklin D. Roosevelt, the polio-paralyzed, legless drug addict, idiotic, suicidal Tsarina fag who had his unbeatable rival Will Rogers exterminated in an exploding ball of flame by a planted bomb here in safe USA airfield shortly after takeoff at the end of Will Rogers' unprecedented, renowned, arduous, round-the-world goodwill flying trip with Wiley Post in his beautiful, electronically sophisticated, luxurious, ultra-modern Winnie Mae airplane. Not only all stairways had inclines added for Tsarina Roosevelt's computerized wheelchair, but a football field-sized glass house-type building was built in back of the White House for his medicinal, piped-in, pure-warmed seawater into his gigantic, suicide-proof, 2-feet-deep swimming pool, where he waded naked with his nurses and had sodomy affairs. One very near to him have written popular books about his sodomy, love affairs. Already in his third term, he was a helpless and useless stretcher case, incapable of even appearing at his fourth-term convention. This one-world communist who married his immediate cousin, Eleanor Roosevelt, like his runted, sickly, pot-faced grandfather, propagandized as a hunter and a sportsman, Teddy Roosevelt, here from Oyster Bay, Long Island, the Rosenfeld family, another computer god's top-secret camouflage for gifted Ethiopians, as a big-time kid gangster politician Computer God even raised his age for historical purposes, Teddy Roosevelt was paid off with the Vice President do absolutely nothing farce position title. Repeatedly, Vice Presidents have successfully waited and lurked to eliminate El Presidente. Below are a few examples. So the kiddish gangster Teddy Roosevelt lured Midwestern dolt McKinley into New York for extermination, like the lowly gutter-mouthed Big L.B. Johnson lured playboy sodomist in with the mafia Jack Kennedy into his hometown, Dallas. Wide open, people say it was the three brothers, Sam, Milton, and Lyman Jacobson, who with the judges feloniously swindled the governor of Texas out of the U.S. Senator election shortly before Lyman was fixed as the compromise choice for Jack Kennedy's vice presidential nominee. Who ever saw a Lyndon married to a tiny runt, Birdie? Under Computer God orders, even Birdie now has changed her name for historical purposes to Lady Bird New, and even her Ethiopian surname is now changed to Taylor. It was this scummy, bum, lowly gangster Lyman as Presidente who had the gigantic Czarina swimming pool deepened several feet to a regular swimming pool and regularly had naked sodomy swimming parties with women personnel. Gangster Monkey C, Gangster Monkey 2. Now, even the Pope John in the Vatican has a similar swimming pool to share with the endless numbers of nuns to help him forget his good old days as a married man naked in bed with high Holy Communion sodomy. Did not that world-renowned untouchable felon gangster Tricky Dick Nixon? His daughter Tricia is married to Davy Eisenschenker Jr. No. Nixon was the sure loser to the fag queer kid Bobby Kennedy until he was lured into very distant Tricky's hometown, Los Angeles. Did not gangster Tricky Dick Nixon do more than feloniously watch eyesight television of Bobby Kennedy's extermination? Abe Lincoln's Computer God, alias for Abe Lincoln's law partner, was Stanton. Abe, in the gangster courts, feloniously conspired, fabricated patent infringements to swindle thousands of dollars from C. McCormick Reaper Machinery Company. As president, Abe made Stanton a cabinet member. In order to automatically become president, Stanton concocted a grandiose murder scheme to murder not only Lincoln, but also the vice president and secretary of state. Secretly, Vice President Johnson overseered it. Lincoln was murdered, and Secretary of State Seward was very seriously injured. Automatic President Harry Schimmelman Truman, in terror, gave political concessions to Congress to enact abolishment of the automatic succession to the presidency by cabinet members for cheap, conspired, felonious pardon fits. Gangster Nixon gave presidency to dope felon Jerry Ford, another Computer God alias, the wide-open, lifelong felon bribe extortionist, forgerer, and check launderer Jerry Ford. David Eisensheimer, or Eisenschenker, another runted, negroidically befreckled, semi-illiterate, cowardly yokel kid, also Jimmy Carter, who shared the sodomy drug beds of the military academy with niggers. Under secret Computer God orders upon graduation, CIA changed even his family gravestones. Camp David in Maryland was named after him, for him, and by him, including the division of SS, Secret Service troops, who even tended his Playboy Giant golf course. Here, David Eisenschenker hid in cowardly terror and watched World War II on Eyesight TV. His historical name, Dwight Eisenhower. As president for months, he was dying, in a coma, useless and helpless. Sneak, shameless, hangman rope gangster, government leaders into Frankenstein, living death, eternal slavery. I now go to death for your lowest deadly felony crimes against me. Frankenstein earphone radio parroting puppet gangster slave, do not dare to repeat any part of this truthful message, for like Mr. Francis E Dec Esquire, you too are expendable, and you too can be beaten bloodily by the gangster police and dragged in chains into a windowless telephone booth type prison cell and put into maximum security insanity prison for undetectable extermination, and by the lowest gangsterism, namely the law, character assassinated for life as an insane criminal menace to this worst gangster communism. Now that your besweated, terrified, trembling delirium has subsided, have your computer subdivisions play out my letter, and you reread my letter for your only hope for a future. Francis E Dec Esquire, 29 Maple Street, Hempstead, New York. Worldwide communist gangster computer god scum on top, staged like Hollywood, with plastic pale stand-in actors, with communist gangster computer god speed recording, instantaneous, simultaneous, edited, simulated voices implanted for all TV and news media microphones in any known language. Unbelievable con artist gangsterism solely for the overall plan. Worldwide eternal Frankenstein living death slavery. Yokel felon King Jimmy Carter, slime from the academies, which Mr. Dec intelligently refused unsolicited acceptance to the most elite academy from here in Niggertown, and even insidious con artist, gangster divorcee Pope John, they both speak Spanish and even Portuguese. Solely Mr. Dec exposes false god sodomy and Gomorrah of you worldwide computer god parroting puppet gangster slaves. Make copies for yourself. You hangman rope gangster scum on top, laugh your mad giggle now.
This has been a Filmways presentation, darling.